Hello my friends, welcome to my corner and welcome to the last video of this series on the 1001 Nights. We're going to be looking at the second half of volume number 3 of the Penguin edition. We're going to start with nights 930 to 940, which present to us the story of Abu Qir and Abu Sir. Abu Qir is a dyer, Abu Sir is a barber, and these two men live in Alexandria. Okay, they are not doing well. They're not very fortunate in that place. They have difficulty finding work. So what they decide to do is they decide to travel together to another land to see if they can find a better situation for themselves. So once they get there, they get established, right? And Abu Sir, the barber, begins to work, while Abu Qir basically stays at home and does nothing. Okay. What happens? Abu Sir, after a while, gets sick from so much working, and it is at that point that Abu Qir decides to steal the money from him, and then he decides to get a job. Okay, it's like he has been supported by this guy all this time, and now that this guy is not functioning anymore, he's like, okay, I guess I better get a job now. He is very fortunate, believe it or not, because in this place where they live right now, they do not know about dyes. Okay, they have one color that they dye their clothes. They are not aware that they could dye these clothes a different color, and Abu Qir teaches them that, and that is how he becomes very, very rich. Eventually Abu Sir recovers and he goes to visit Abu Qir, to see if maybe he can help him. Instead, he gets a beating. Okay, Abu Qir calls him a thief, and he has him beat up by people who are around him. So a very, very unfair situation for him. Abu Sir is like, okay, I guess I should go my own way and do my own thing. He does, and eventually he becomes rich too, because there was another thing that people in this other country, this other land, have no idea about, and that is baths. Okay, apparently they don't know what a bath is. So Abu Sir opens the first bathhouse in the town. He does great, right? So the two men at this point are rich. It is at that point that they meet again. Okay, but I'm not going to tell you what happens. As usual, I just want to inspire you to read the book and give you some information about the stories so that at least you can decide which ones you would like to explore further. The main theme of the story of Abu Qir and Abu Sir is justice, and in particular, we are talking about justice towards people who have been nice to you, towards your benefactors, basically. The story of Abdallah of the land and Abdallah of the sea is really a lovely one. This was one of my favorites, and you can find it on nights 940 to 946. Now, the beginning of this story is exactly the same as the beginning of a previous story that we have encountered, but don't let that deter you, okay, because it soon becomes something quite different. Abdallah is a fisherman who cannot catch fish, right? So on the way back home, he meets a baker, and this baker is really nice to him. He gives him money, he lets him have bread and all that. Now, one day, Abdallah is quite fortunate. He catches a merman. Okay, it's a very interesting thing that happens here. And the merman's name happens to be Abdallah too. So you have the Abdallah of the land and the Abdallah of the sea. If you do decide to read this one, pay attention to the names because they are important in this tale. The merman says, all that I want from you is just bring me some fruit. Okay, bring me some fruit to eat because we don't have that in our kingdom. And in exchange for that, you, Abdallah of the land, can have jewels, because to us, jewels are completely useless, right? In the sea, they just have jewels all over the place. They don't care about that. I really like this story because of the fact that it presents to us a different world, right? We have the underwater realm. It's a universe within this story that we have not encountered, often before. Towards the end, the merman gives Abdallah a tour of the kingdom of the sea, and that is really what I like about this part. There were other stories dealing with the sea, but this one we really get in there. We see the details because Abdallah gets to meet the merman's family. He gets to meet the king of the sea. They laugh at him. It's really, really nice. It's quite fantastic, and the ending is really good too. It's I would say it's an abrupt ending. I was not expecting it at all. In a way, it's funny too. So I really enjoyed that part of the story also. Harun al-Rashid and Abul Hassan of Oman, nights 946 to 952. In this story, Harun al-Rashid is not feeling well. So his vizier, Jafar, recommends traveling. That is what they do. They reach a building where they hear a beautiful song, right? So they're like, wow, I would like to go in there and meet the girl whose voice this is. So they decide to go inside. They do meet the girl, but they also meet a character, a very intriguing character called Abul Hassan, who is extremely pale, okay? So he tells the story of that, how that happened, how it was that he became so pale. And this story involves an amulet that has healing properties. We also get poetry again in this story, which is something that was lacking in the last couple of stories, but we come back to great poetry here. And I would say that this story itself is the plot, the tale itself is not really anything spectacular, but it, especially when you have just read the story of the Abdallah of the land and Abdallah of the sea, but it's still a good story. So I recommend this one also. On nights 952 to 959, we have the story of Ibrahim and Jamila. This one begins in a very, very nice way when Ibrahim sees in a book the image of a beautiful girl. So this is just a book, right? It's a picture, a painting. And he decides to go in search of the painter. He's like, wow, I would really like to meet the painter of this to see if this girl is actually, if she actually exists, so that I can meet her too. I was surprised at how relevant this story is in our time, because I'll be honest with you, the first thing I thought about when I read this idea, okay, the guy falls in love with this girl whom he has seen in a drawing, is the concept of celebrity crushes, right? There are people who quote unquote fall in love with celebrities. Whether you call it love or not, that's another story, but you know what I mean, right? That's what's going on right here. And also, without going to that idea of the celebrity crush, we have the fact that through online dating, right, these days there are many people who meet each other first through, by seeing each other's images, not in quote unquote real life, right? There are many quotation marks here. Also, think about this, that has been even more important during the pandemic, right? How many people met first through a Zoom meeting or something like that. That's how I met my girlfriend. The first time that I saw her, it was through a Zoom meeting. So you know what I mean, it's a very relevant topic. So I really like that about this story of Ibrahim and Jamila. It turns out that the girl does exist. Okay, so Ibrahim finds out about this. He is told, yes, that is actually a real girl. Her name is Jamila, right? But forget about it. She hates men. Okay, so very unfortunate situation for him right there. I don't really want to say more about this one. Okay, I just want to let you explore it, because as I said, it's relevant, it's current, and it really it reads very well. Abul Hassan al-Khurasani on nights 959 to 963. In this one, the Caliph and his vizier visit a very wealthy man whose name is Abul Hassan. Everything is going great until they realize that everything in Abul Hassan's house bears the name of the Caliph's grandfather. So the Caliph is like, what the heck, Abul Hassan, it's like, how did this happen? You've got some explaining to do, my friend. And he does, he explains how it is that everything belonging to the Caliph's grandfather came to belong to him. The story is very good too. It's not only that he says, yeah, it's true, I have your grandfather's things. It's actually a very interesting turn of events by which that came about. He once met a girl, basically, while working at his father's shop. He was there, and this beautiful girl comes in, and she's like, can you give me 300 dinars? So Abul Hassan tells his assistant, okay, give her 300 dinars. And the girl walks away. The assistant is like, Abul Hassan, who was that? He's like, I have no idea. Okay, he was so struck by this girl's beauty that he just gave her 300 dinars without even knowing who she was, and he doesn't care, right? Anyway, he investigates and he finds out about the girl, and as usual, there's a little bit of a problem. He's told that girl is Shajarat al-Dur. She's the Caliph's favorite slave girl. Okay, so once again, the question, of course, is, will the lovers be united? And I will let you, my friend, discover that. Okay, this is a great story. One of the points about it is the benefits of telling the truth. I think that is what I got from it mainly. Kamar al-Zaman, Nights 963 to 978. This is a longer tale, maybe about 40 pages long. We get some longer tales as we reach the end of the entire book. Undoubtedly, this is one of the most problematic stories in the entire 1001 Nights. The plot is problematic, the structure is problematic, the politics, the moral, everything is really problematic. But to me, that is what makes it intriguing, right? This is the Mansfield Park of the 1001 Nights, if we talk about the Jane Austen context. It begins as a framed narrative, but then the frame is completely, forgotten. It doesn't even seem to have a role to play there. So, you know what I mean? From the very beginning, we have a problematic structure right there. It changes direction towards the end, So there are many, many issues with this story. And the theme, the principal topic, is adultery, a favorite theme of the 1001 Nights, as you know, because that's the way the whole story begins in the first place. There are many, many good moments in this one. For example, I have written some down. We learn about a town where everyone locks themselves up, including dogs and cats, because there is one woman there who cannot be seen. To look at this woman is to be executed. So Fridays, everybody locks themselves up. Kamar al-Zaman, of course, becomes infatuated with this woman. It has to be this woman. Many of the characters of the 1001 Nights, as you know by now, seem to be unable to accept the notion that there are plenty of fish in the sea. It's like he could go for anybody else, but it has to be that woman that you look at and you're executed, right? But that's why we have the story, and that's why it's so wonderful. The woman is the wife of a jeweler who managed to pierce a gem, okay, right through the middle, at the request of the king. So he's a great jeweler, very good at his work. And he becomes friends with Kamar al-Zaman without knowing that Kamar and his wife are attracted to each other. That's where you get a hilarious episode involving mosquitoes. And I'm not going to spoil for you, but I'm going to say this. That was one of the funniest moments for me in the entire 1001 Nights. It was one of those moments where I actually laughed out loud, and that doesn't happen very often with me. I do laugh in real life and everything, but I rarely laugh while I'm reading. But this was one of those special moments for me. The part that really threw me off is when Kamar goes back to his father. I thought at that point, without giving you the details, I thought, all that trouble for this? That part is problematic also, and you will see what I mean when you read the story. But if I had to describe this one, I would say it's problematic, but it's compelling. Okay, I do recommend this story, and I did enjoy it very much. Nights 978 to 989, we have the story of Abdallah ibn Fadil and his brothers. In this one, the Caliph realizes that a certain region has not contributed with the tax. So he sends somebody over so that he can ask, okay, what's up? Where's the Caliph's money? The governor, once the envoy gets there, says, oh yeah, I was just about to send the money. So it's like, okay, but now you can stay here, and we can throw a party for you. So the envoy stays there. He has a great time with the people there. But then that night, one of those nights, by accident, he realizes that the governor of this place, Abdallah, has 2 dogs that he whips and then he comforts. So he's like, that's weird, right? So he goes back to the Caliph and he tells the Caliph about this. And the Caliph is like, this is very strange. We're going to need to call that guy here so that he can, explain what's going on with this. And Abdallah does explain. He says, okay, yeah, those dogs, they're not dogs. They're my brothers. Okay, interesting, right? But that hardly explains the whipping and the comforting. So it's really, at that point, Abdallah tells the story of how, things came to be that way. And this story involves, among other things, he's saving a white snake from being raped by a black snake. Also a city whose inhabitants have been turned to stone. A girl who can turn into a bird, a dolphin who saves a person from drowning, and also, last but not least, some of the most ungrateful characters that you will find in the entire book. There are many, many elements in this story from previous stories. So there are many times where you're going to go like, oh, I've read about this before. But basically this one is a cautionary tale about the dangers of envy, of being, jealous or envious of other people. And then we have the final story of the 1001 Nights, the final independent story, which is that of Maruf the Cobbler. It takes place on nights 989 to 1001. In this story, a man has an abusive wife. So with the help of a genie, he is taken to a distant land where the wife will not be able to abuse him. And then in this faraway land, he meets a childhood friend right there who helps him to establish himself. Basically what he does is he pretends to be rich. He says, I am a rich man, but my goods and my money are still in the place where I was living before. They will arrive. So he lives on credit, basically. He manages to get everything he wants on credit, and he even manages to marry the king's daughter based on this whole non-existent wealth that he has, or that he claims to have. The problem is that the vizier had asked for the princess's hand before, and he had been rejected. You can see some echoes of the popular version of Aladdin that we know in this story. So of course the vizier is envious of Maruf, right? And he begins to think maybe this Maruf guy is not what he appears to be. The story has a surprise ending that I liked very much. And part of the point, I think, of the story could be that cunning is a good thing, and is rewarded as long as you remain fair and just, And if you can be kind to those people who are less fortunate, then that's a plus. You know what I mean? So that is one of the things that you can learn from this one. And also a very important moral that it carries is that of being careful when people say they're sorry, because you never know. They may not exactly mean it. So as I said before, this is the last story in the 1001 Nights, and I thought it was a great conclusion to the entire cycle of stories. After that, on night 1001, we finally get the conclusion of the story of King Shahryar and Shahrazad, okay, which you may know, but I am not going to spoil for you, because I don't want you to say I am not going to read the 1001 Nights because Jorge spoiled the ending for me. Okay, if you don't want to read it, don't read it, but I am not going to provide you with an excuse for that. And I have one more thing to say about this book, because as you may recall, the last volume, the third volume of the Penguin edition, includes the story of Aladdin in an appendix, because it is not included in the original collection of tales. This is also a story that Galland, the French translator, added, and he heard it first from Hannah Diab, the Syrian storyteller. Most of us know the story of Aladdin in one form or another, but I'm going to give you the bare, structure of the quote-unquote original tale, because it's not really original. But here's the thing. Aladdin is basically a childish, irresponsible young man. His father dies at one point, and so his mother is worried about him and how he's going to, make a living and all that. At that point, a magician comes into the story, and he takes Aladdin to a cave, and he asks him to go down this cave and retrieve that famous lamp that we all know about. When Aladdin gets the lamp, he is very close to the magician, but for some reason he decides to hold on to the lamp a little bit longer. So the magician decides to lock him up in that cave. He also finds a ring. So we have a ring and a lamp, both of which are attached to a genie that makes wishes come true, right? So, the ring and the lamp, we have these magical objects right here. And when the lamp's genie appears, Aladdin asks for food. That is the first thing that he wants. Then, after he's done eating the food with his mother and everything, he decides to sell the plate on which he found this food. And that's how he begins to make money. Later on, Aladdin sees the princess, not Jasmine, okay, but Badr al-Budur. That's her real name, and he wants to marry her. So he has the genie help him with that, right? There's a little bit of a problem here too, and that is that the Sultan had promised Badr al-Budur to the vizier's son. Okay, so we have that competition right there. Aladdin has the genie abduct the couple, and then he asks for the genie to build a palace. The ending of the story is slightly different from what we have heard before, right? Or from the popular version of the story of Aladdin, because the magician reappears, and then we also meet the magician's brother. Okay, so at the end, at the very end, the very last thing we get is the lesson or the moral for this story. It is presented to us as a story about moderation. You can read it and decide whether you agree with the official, moral or not. But that is how Shahrazad sells the story to the Sultan, and he also tells him what he can learn from all of the characters that we have met in this tale. So, my friends, that concludes our journey through the 1001 Nights. I started reading this book, let's see if I can remember, on May 24th. And it took me exactly 74 days to finish it. As you can tell, I read rather slowly because I also read other things and I did other things too. So there were some days that I did not read, then other days I read more, etc. You know how it works. It was a very rewarding experience. Okay, I have great memories that I'm gonna keep of this book. Until the last day of my life, probably. So I really recommend this book to you, and I wanted to do something also to give you something extra and to help you a little bit navigate this book. You know how it is when you say the 1001 Nights, everybody's like, oh yeah, Aladdin, Ali Baba, Sinbad, yeah, those are the three most famous stories. But how about this? What if you had a list of some of the best stories from the 1001 Nights other than those three? So you can say, yeah, but there is also the story of... So what I did was I put together a list that I'm going to share with you right now of 10 great stories, longish ones, okay, not the fables, not the little stories, but longer stories that are, I believe, worth your time. So if you explore these, the story of Aziz and Aziza, the story of King Shahriman and his son Kamar al-Zaman, Uns al-Wujud and al-Ward fil Akmam, Hasib Karim al-Din and the Snake Queen, the City of Brass, the adventures of Ali al-Saibak, Julnar of the Sea and her son Badr Basim, Abdallah of the Land and Abdallah of the Sea, Kamar al-Zaman, and Maruf the Cobbler. I think you would have a very good idea of what this collection of stories is like, other than the famous stories, as I said before, which, by the way, two of them are not even included in the original version of the book. So I hope that you enjoy these stories. This is a very long book, of course, and I will say more than that. It's an infinite book. You can keep adding things to it, as so many authors have done. But also there's this idea that Borges mentions that I did not, share with you in the first video, that I purposely left for this last comment. He compares the title. He takes the title, okay, 1001 Nights. Why 1001? And he compares that to the phrase that we have in English, forever and a day, right? You know that expression, it's like forever and a day, infinity plus one. So 1001 represents this idea that this is a never-ending story, literally, like that great book, The Never-Ending Story. I think, it's, I keep thinking, am I ever going to reread this book? Maybe in a different translation. Maybe I could read the famous translation by Richard Burton. I am not sure whether that is going to happen, because there are so many books that I want to read that I know I would need like probably about 5 lifetimes in order to be done with that. But I know I will keep coming back to these stories. That is also, a reason why I may be watching these videos in the future myself, because I probably will not remember everything that I said and that I encountered in this book. For the time being, all that I hope and all that I wish is that these videos were useful to you and that you got something out of this reading experience that I decided to have, so that, as I always say, it doesn't just stay here in this room, and that other people may be inspired to check out this great work of literature that I think, you know, we can all learn from and that we can all enjoy. So once again, that was the last video of this reading vlog about the 1001 Nights. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day.